You need a home and I need a mommy, Laya said with a soft, innocent voice, her words piercing the chilly air like a whisper lost among the falling snowflakes. Elliot Monroe spun around, startled, his phone still clutched to his ear. His 4-year-old daughter stood at the bus stop, facing a young homeless woman sitting on the bench. Laya's mittened hands rested gently on the woman's lap, offering warmth. The woman, wrapped in a worn, tattered coat, didn't move. Her pale blue eyes blinked slowly, clouded with exhaustion. She looked almost ghostly, as if she were a shadow, curled inward, gripping a faded tote bag for comfort. Snowflakes caught in the mess of her golden hair, and her lips were parted, struggling to catch a breath. Laya placed a small, bear-shaped cookie carefully into the woman's lap, her little hands shaking slightly with the cold. "You can live with us," she added with an unwavering conviction that only a child could possess. "Laya!" Elliot's voice came as a sharp warning, and he rushed over, ending his phone call as he pulled his daughter back with concern. He knelt beside her, looking up at the young woman with a watchful eye. "Miss, what are you doing with my daughter?" The woman slowly raised her hands in defense, her palms facing outward, a gesture of innocence. "Nothing. She just came over." "I didn't touch her," she replied in a hoarse but steady voice. Elliot studied her, his gaze lingering on the redness of her skin, the unnatural flush in her face, and the way her breath seemed labored. His eyes scanned for any signs of danger, but found none. She hadn't asked for anything, had not begged. There was something about the quiet way she sat, about her stillness, that unsettled him more than any words could have. Laya, oblivious to the tension, turned to him with a matter-of-fact statement. She gave her cookie to a cat first. Elliot followed her gaze and saw the remains of a torn bread roll, half of it already eaten, now surrounded by a scruffy cat pawing at the crumbs. Elliot blinked, trying to understand. He pulled Laya's hand and muttered, "We should go." But as he turned to leave, he heard the woman shift behind him, and before he could react, she stumbled. Her knees buckled, and she crashed into the icy metal post of the shelter, collapsing to the ground. "Dad!" Laya cried, tugging at his coat. Without hesitation, Elliot turned back to the fallen woman, rushing to her side. "Miss, are you okay?" He shook her gently, but she didn't respond. Her pulse, though faint, was there. Her skin was cold, but her forehead burned with fever. Panic flickered in his chest, but he forced it down. There was no time to wait for help. He had to act. Quickly he scooped her up. The woman's body was light, too light, like a fragile thing. She didn't resist, only whimpered softly against his chest. "We need to get you warm," he murmured as he turned to Laya. "Let's go." "Is she going to die?" Laya asked, her wide eyes filled with concern. "Not if we get her warm," he replied, urgency in his tone as he hurried through the snow. Their house wasn't far, just 3 blocks away, but every step seemed to weigh heavier. The woman in his arms had no name, no story he could understand, but something had shifted when she fell, and now he couldn't turn away. He didn't know why. He just couldn't. When they reached the porch, Laya's voice, barely a whisper, broke through the moment. "I still think she's our home now." Elliot didn't respond. He just opened the door. Isabel stirred beneath a wool blanket, the warmth of the fire barely touching the chill in her bones. Her eyelids fluttered open slowly, adjusting to the soft amber glow that filled the room. The faint scent of cedar and cinnamon lingered in the air, mixing with the faint sound of something cooking in the kitchen. As her senses came back into focus, Isabel realized she was lying on a long couch, a pillow cradling her head. Her coat was neatly folded at the foot of the sofa, but she had no memory of being brought here. The last thing she remembered was the bus stop, the little girl, and the snow. A soft scratching sound caught her attention, and she turned to see Laya sitting cross-legged on the rug, completely absorbed in her drawing. Her tongue poked out from between her teeth as she worked with fierce concentration, her crayon moving quickly across the page. The image was simple: 3 stick figures holding hands, one small, one tall, and one with a halo of golden hair. Laya looked up at her, a proud grin on her face. "That's us," she said matter-of-factly, holding up the picture for Isabel to see. Isabel blinked, stunned. She had no idea what to say. Her throat felt dry and her body ached, but there was something about the pure simplicity of Laya's gesture that made her heart soften. Before Isabel could speak, Laya bounced to her feet. "You woke up," she exclaimed, showing off her drawing again. "Daddy says you can stay until you're better, but I think you should stay longer." The sound of footsteps interrupted them, and Isabel looked up to see Elliot entering the room, his face unreadable as he set a glass of water and a bowl of soup on the coffee table in front of her. "You passed out in the snow," he said, his voice flat. "I didn't have a choice. You needed help. When you're better, you'll leave." The words felt like a punch in her chest. His tone wasn't unkind, but it wasn't welcoming either. Isabel nodded, trying not to show how much the coldness of his words hurt. "Thank you," she said softly, lowering her gaze. Laya lingered beside her, clearly wanting to chat more, but Elliot gently took his daughter's hand and led her away. "Let her rest," he murmured. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Isabel ate slowly, barely able to taste the soup, but she forced herself to finish. She sat at the breakfast bar, carefully distancing herself from the warmth of the family. There was no place for her there, not yet. Every time she caught a glimpse of Elliot, his face was unreadable. And every time she saw Laya's bright smile, it made something deep inside her twist. That night, as she helped clear the dishes, Isabel's sleeve slipped down, revealing a jagged scar across her wrist. Elliot, who had been distracted, suddenly froze, his eyes locking onto the long, raw mark. He didn't say anything, but the image stayed with him, digging into his thoughts. The night stretched on, and as the house grew still, Elliot found himself awake long after the others had gone to bed. He tried to focus on a book he had been reading, but his mind kept wandering back to Isabel, to her scars, to the way she looked at him with cautious gratitude. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get close enough to understand it. The silence in the house was thick, but in the midst of it, Elliot could feel something unspoken between him and the woman on the couch, and it frightened him. The next morning the house felt different. Isabel had woken to the scent of fresh tea, the sound of Laya's small footsteps echoing through the hall. Her head still throbbed from the fever, but the worst of it had passed. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting long shadows across the room. She noticed a steaming mug of tea placed carefully by her bedside, the gentle aroma of ginger and honey filling the air. Beneath it, a small folded napkin caught her attention. She opened it slowly, reading the neat, measured handwriting, "You're not invisible." Her heart squeezed as she traced the words with her fingers. For the first time in years, someone had truly seen her. Not the headlines, not the accusations, but her. The raw truth of who she was. She held the napkin to her chest for a moment, a tear escaping despite herself. It wasn't much, but it was everything. As the morning unfolded, Isabel moved quietly through the kitchen. She had insisted on helping, something she hadn't done for herself in a long time. It made her feel needed, useful. She was stirring a pot of soup when Elliot entered, his eyes still shadowed with the weight of the past few days. She glanced up at him, offering a faint smile. "That smells familiar," he said, a hint of recognition in his voice. Isabel smiled back softly. "Just something simple. I learned it from a couple I stayed with in Queens. They taught me how to turn scraps into comfort." She glanced over at him, unsure if he would say anything else, but Elliot remained quiet, his eyes on the soup. Without warning, he spooned a taste and froze. A look of surprise flickered across his face. He put the spoon down slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "It tastes just like the soup my wife used to make," he said softly, his voice low. For a brief moment, Isabel's heart raced. Was this a compliment, a subtle reminder of her past? She didn't know, but the discomfort in the air was palpable. She continued stirring the soup, unsure of how to respond. That night, when Laya had gone to bed, the tension between them seemed to reach its peak. Isabel was helping to clear the dishes when Elliot's voice broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" She turned to him, noticing the hesitation in his eyes. "Of course." He showed her the article. Her name was there, the accusation of stealing designs from a prestigious New York showcase. It was all over the internet. He stared at her, waiting for an answer. Isabel stood still for a moment, her face unreadable. Then, in a voice that was both calm and weary, she said, "I didn't steal anything. That design was mine. But after a while, people didn't care about the truth. They just wanted someone to blame." Elliot stayed silent. Her words hung in the air between them, the weight of them heavy. She looked at him, eyes tired but clear. "So tell me, do you believe me?" He hesitated. The words were on the tip of his tongue, but he swallowed them down. She was right. He didn't know what to believe. The rational part of him wanted to distance himself, protect himself, but something in him had already begun to let go. "I don't know," he murmured softly, more to himself than to her. Isabel nodded as if she had expected the answer. "That's all I needed to hear." She crossed her arms, pulling herself inward, the walls around her coming up once again. "Thank you for your honesty." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Elliot standing alone in the dimly lit room. His thoughts churned, and he couldn't shake the image of Isabel's face, the quiet pain beneath her calm exterior. Later that evening, as he passed by Laya's room, he saw her sitting on the edge of the bed, eyes wide and unblinking. "Isabel's leaving, isn't she?" Laya asked in a small, uncertain voice. Elliot felt his heart tighten. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said softly, sitting down next to her. "But I think she's trying to find herself." Laya's small hands clutched her bare tightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Is she coming back?" she asked. Elliot swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. "I hope so," he said, his voice rough. "I really do." That night, as the house settled into silence, a feeling of loss hung heavy in the air. Isabel's absence was already beginning to take root. Elliot, alone in the quiet of his home, realized he hadn't just lost her. He had lost the chance to find something real, something that could bring light into the darkness he had been living in for so long. If this story stirred something in your heart, if it reminded you that love often comes wrapped in the most unexpected moments, then we invite you to stay. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales that touch your heart, heal your soul, and remind you that even on the hardest days, tomorrow is still a gift. Thank you for watching.